Welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever stared down a massive corporate project budget and thought, where on earth do these bottom line numbers actually come from? Well, today we're taking a sledgehammer to what is probably the most misunderstood, misused, and honestly, the most expensive concept in corporate project planning. We are breaking down the fallacy of treating contingency like financial holy water. Let's just jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. Contingency is the most abused word in project controls. I mean, let's be completely honest with ourselves for a second here. Have you ever looked at a complex spreadsheet, realized there were massive gaping holes in your knowledge, and just tacked on a percentage at the bottom to make the whole thing look, professional? It's basically a really polite way of saying we have absolutely no idea what is going to happen. But, as you're about to see, relying on that abused word, it's a wildly dangerous game.
Which brings us to Section 1, the magic word misused and what contingency is definitively not.
So let's break down this fantasy versus reality. In the fantasy world, people treat contingency like a magic bucket, or maybe a comfort blanket. It's that arbitrary padding we throw in because the project's design is, well, having a massive identity crisis. It's used to mask missing design or just pure, unadulterated optimism dressed up in corporate clothing. It relies on this sacred, almost religious belief that somehow procurement will sort it out later. But in reality, contingency actually has one job, just one, to cover known uncertainty. It is absolutely not a catch-all for poor scope definition. Moving right along to Section 2, financial holy water and the illusion of safety. Now, it's fascinating how this boardroom psychology escalates. First, you sprinkle a little 10% contingency onto your budget, and suddenly, everybody in the room just feels a little safer, right? It's like a magical blessing that forgives all your planning sins. Then, maybe you sprinkle 20%. Now, you don't just feel safe, you look highly responsible to your stakeholders. And then, you sprinkle 30%. Wow, congratulations. As the source material Riley points out, you have just invented risk management without actually doing any risk management. It's a complete illusion of safety. And this really highlights the absolute absurdity of the whole situation. Because we skip doing the hard work of defining the scope, we suddenly expect contingency to be, a crystal ball to predict the future? A therapist to calm our corporate anxieties? An ironclad legal disclaimer? Or maybe even a small emergency government ready to bail us out of a crisis? The problem here is incredibly simple. People want this one little line item to do the heavy lifting that basic professional judgment was supposed to do. It's expected to replace the actual hard work of outlining assumptions, exclusions, design maturity, risk registers, and constructability reviews. There is just no way it can do all that. This leads us directly into Section 3, the corporate burial ground, or where uncomfortable truths go to die. Let's look at how this disaster builds over time. Walk through this timeline with me. Because if you've been in corporate planning, I guarantee you have lived this. Day 1, you sprinkle that contingency. Boom, everyone feels great. But then we hit months 2 through 5. Because the foundational work wasn't done, this contingency fund simply morphs into the place where uncomfortable truths go to die. Every missing design flaw, every bit of poorly defined scope, it all gets quietly buried in that fund. And then, inevitably, we arrive at the 6-month mark. The budget has completely evaporated, and everyone is sitting around a conference table acting completely, utterly shocked that the contingency is gone. But of course it's gone. Actually, let's be real, it was never a contingency. It was a burial ground. Those funds didn't vanish due to some unforeseen, unquantifiable act of nature. No, they vanished because they were a graveyard for rushed governance and strategic amnesia. The problem is never the contingency itself. The problem is pretending that a tiny percentage point can magically compensate for a weak scope.
All right, Section 4, quantifying known uncertainty and how to build a proper estimate.
So how do we actually stop this crazy cycle? Well, a genuinely rigorous estimate requires strict parameters. Step 1, your estimate absolutely must explicitly explain what the contingency covers. Step 2, it must explicitly explain what it does not cover. And step 3, you have to state the mathematical level of confidence in it. Because just sitting in a meeting and saying, oh, we included contingency is not an acceptable answer anymore. In fact, that statement is usually the beginning of an interrogation. Somewhere in that meeting, someone is going to ask the awkward question, wait, why wasn't this specific risk included? And if you haven't followed these 3 steps, you're not going to have an answer. So the crucial point is this. Contingency is not there to save bad project planning. It is there to quantify uncertainty. That is the fundamental paradigm shift we have to make here.
It's the stark difference between using a financial tool to cover up your team's mistakes and skip steps versus using it to rigorously and methodically measure actual risk.
Small difference, right? But a very, very large invoice. Pretending that contingency can compensate for a weak scope definition and strategic amnesia isn't just a minor procedural oopsie, it is a massive financial liability that is eventually going to come due. When you treat contingency like holy water, you are setting your entire project up for a very rude and incredibly expensive awakening. Which leaves us with this final, critical question for you to take back to your own teams. I really want you to look at your spreadsheets, look at your project controls, and ask yourself honestly, is your contingency actually quantifying uncertainty, or is it just saving bad project planning? Think about that the next time you're tempted to just sprinkle a quick 20% on the bottom line. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this helps you build sharper, much more honest estimates in the future.